This is episode 2 of the Rich Sony podcast, and today I'm joined by my friend Ian Grabill. Actually, I never asked you how to say your last name. Is it Grabill?
It's Grabill. It's Grabill. Um, yeah, kind of like the Bill Park. It's like, yeah, just kind of.
What what nationality is that last name coming
I
from?
think it's German.
German. Okay, yeah. So Grabill. Ian and I worked together at Ticket Evolution, small startup. I worked there for 4 years, I think, and I have no idea what years they were. It was like 20. I think I left in 2018, and I started in 2014.
14?
Yeah, 2014 to 18 sounds right to me. And you were there longer, way longer than me.
2012 to 2019.
Gotcha. So something 7 years.
Yeah.
So that was a decent chunk of time, and yeah, we had some fun times there. We were software developers, and that was pretty much my first job as a serious software developer. I don't know. I feel like it might have been the same for you, right?
It was, yeah. Yeah. It was, I come from marketing job and then kind of programming on the side, but that was my first true like programming role. First kind of second tech job, but yeah, first programming.
Yeah, and your background was in like bio, was it?
Marine bio.
Before
Yeah.
that, marine bio. Nice.
Yeah.
You have to meet my friend Nilsson. He's also has marine bio and oceanography he's into.
Yeah, it's like a pretty distinct like fork in the track of what you take. Like one's like, do you want to play with animals or do you want to play with like instruments? And I opted for the animal side, but yeah, it's I didn't do much marine bio after school. I jumped right into actually came out of school, did some selling of snowboards at a snowboard shop. My dad like berated me for not using my degree. Then I went down like I think I applied. I think I took my LSATs. Thought I want to be a lawyer, IP lawyer at one point. Then I decided to fall back on my degree and went and did some research at a genetics lab on Long Island.
And you're from Long Island originally, right?
Yeah. Originally from Manhattan, but we moved out to Long Island when I got older. And then yeah, I was actually at the lab that they were doing a bunch of bioinformatics stuff. And this like whiz kid was like doing a bunch of Python, PHP stuff. And I was like, I knew of code, but I didn't know there was like a profession in it. And just started playing around with it. He like told me to learn PHP. I decided not to, and then ended up learning Rails and used Ruby all in like my next job. And from there, the rest is history, and I've been programming ever since.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, and we used Rails at Ticket Evolution. That was like our stack. Are you still doing Rails now? What's been the new stuff you've been working on?
I mostly just stick with Rails just because it's so easy to prototype and build in.
I agree. Yeah.
We at my day job, we were a dev agency, or I guess kind of full suite agency, design, dev, and business strategy. Company called Blend Labs, but they were doing a lot of Next.js, React Native. We're kind of a bit weird in that we do just Laravel in the back end on the API side, but just because we know it and it works well, and so that's usually the combo of Laravel, PHP on the API side, back end side, and then some form of JS on the front end.
Sweet. How do you like the agency life versus working at like a startup? I actually was just talking with another friend about this. I'm curious to hear your take on it.
Yeah, it was an interesting transition. I think for me, because I have this kind of maker mindset where I just want to do a lot of different things, it works really well. because I get to work with a lot of different clients, a lot of different businesses. It's a good shallow dive into a lot of different things. Where when you're at a startup, you've got a sole product, and the product might have different product lines, but at the end of the day, you're really only solving one business need. So the agency move has been good for me. I've liked it. It allows me just to see a lot of different things and try a lot of different technologies. The part that I don't love is like time is money kind of concept, which every contractor, consultant is going to understand. And there is I think the other big negative is probably just you don't get to see the full life cycle of a product. Customer comes to you, you build this version, they're happy with it, and then you kind of like take your baby and go off with it. And like you might see it later on, you might not. But that part's I think a little hard at times, just because you put a lot of effort into it and you don't get to see the end product.
Yeah, that's exactly what my one friend was saying. And he's a designer, and he has not, he also transitioned into tech from a different background. He had like a music background before that. And he started as an agency, and he's like, yeah, it's hard. Like I've never really seen anything like past its infant stage or its, early child stage. And I'm, curious to see what it's like. So I think it's interesting that you have the same thought after having seen stuff more mature.
Yeah. I also think like, from the developer standpoint, before I joined TiVo, I had actually applied for a couple different agency jobs. And, the big sell was like, oh, you get to like, try a bunch of different technologies and see what you like. In hindsight, I actually think it's probably not a great place for early stage devs to go, just because you don't get that like end-to-end structure. You don't necessarily scale a single problem. You don't get to iterate on the development of the platform like over time. You do get to try a lot of different tech, which is like probably pretty cool, but I think that's better for someone who already has the fundamentals in place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can totally see that, especially for getting that next job. It's got to be hard if you only have agency experience to get in somewhere that's not an early stage startup, because you just don't like, even coming out of Ticket Evolution, it was hard for me because I wanted to go somewhere that was growing a little faster. And every interview, like I remember I interviewed at SoundCloud, and they were like, what happens when you have 1 million concurrent users hitting your system? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. Like I never dealt with that. So that was one thing that like I was lucky to get into WeWork to see, because once you start dealing with those scaling issues, it's just another skill. It's no different than, when we were at TiVo, we had a lot of database issues. We had high database throughput because of ingestion. So like that actually came to save me a few times at WeWork, because I was like, I've seen this stuff happen with PG Bouncer before. Like we have to configure this. But we weren't on Heroku, but we never saw Heroku crap out. Like that was stuff that I got at WeWork. And yeah, like going into WeWork was on Heroku for a significant amount of time while I was there. They're on Kubernetes now, but yeah, it was Heroku when I started.
That's wild. That's cool.
Yeah. And the app that I was working on, the conference rooms app, was really high throughput, right? Like it's basically every conference room reservation for WeWork, and there's a lot of them, and a lot of people are hitting those endpoints to read the scheduling, and it was a really complicated problem. I pretty much stuck with that. Like I defended my entire time there while they were changing structure and everything. I was like, I want to stay with the conference room app because it was really cool. It was an awesome problem on the front end and the back end, because basically when you're looking at the schedule, right? Like you were a member, right? So I'm assuming you used the booking for that.
You swipe over the time slots and pick the room you want.
Any that on the web, I didn't build it on iOS, but the web, that was all me. Like the
Cool.
time slot selector thing. Um, and that view is personalized per like when you're a WeWork member, it shows different availability than if you're just Ian the member.
Oh, cool.
So it's not there's like caching issues with it. Yeah, it's a really fun problem space. Then you have all we had this at TiVo, of course, right? Like, and by the way, for anyone listening, it's like confusing, but TiVo is what we call Ticket Evolution. It's not like TiVo, the TV thing.
Oh yeah, I hadn't
Um,
thought about that before.
yeah, I
Yeah.
always thought that like since I started at Ticket Evolution, I'm like it's the same as the TV thing. Um, yeah, I lost my train of just like we had at TiVo, conference rooms has some really fun time domain problems, which are just like the worst, but also really fun. It's like if somebody's sitting if you're in Toronto and you want to book a conference room for your CEO who's sitting in Australia, what time do you show on the selector? Like that kind of thing is
Yeah.
really fun. Um, yeah. So
This has always
th-
been interesting hearing you talk about this because I think this is like a very fundamental difference between you and I. Like you at TiVo, I remember like you got really deep on like specific problems and you like really enjoyed them. Whereas me, like I'm a generalist. Like I like the kind of I would struggle working on the scheduling app long term because like it's too deep, it's too focused. It doesn't like it has immense value, but like I kind of need that like bigger picture value of like yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk about it because like I'm like thinking to myself like, man, I would hate that. I would hate working on like one thing for that long. And that was kind of my struggle at TiVo too at times because you know we had little pieces, but I think that's also why I generalized so much there too.
that's a really good observation because that's a spectrum for sure. And like developers sit at different places on the spectrum because there are people I wasn't as focused as it might seem because I also was working on a web thing, which was similar to how like the POS was at TiVo, where there was like no one working on it. When I started as a front end developer and um, there was no front end developers working on this app that like the guy just quit right before exactly like what happened to me at TiVo when Clem had left
Yeah.
and everyone's like, we don't know JavaScript. You have to figure it out. And that's a good place to be. Yeah, the Backbone app. Yep. And at WeWork, it was an Angular app. And um that was there were like two big streams of things. So it was like that app. It still is very deep, right? But like that app was everything. It was guest booking, conference room booking, like the whole shebang was what I kind of took when I started. And then as WeWork grew, that segmented out to different product teams. And I just stuck with the conference room tab.
Mm.
And I still was kind of a lead over this whole app and I had to guide the architecture of it. And it was a shit show. But honestly, when I left my last week or month, maybe, we rewrote the whole app in React using it wasn't a Next.js app, it was just Create React app, but it took like 4 years to make that happen. And everyone had gotten like laid off, like the team grew, everyone got laid off except for two of us. The one guy actually left and he went to Spotify. So he's at Spotify with me now. He was my manager. So I like came back from parental leave and he was like, I'm leaving. You're the last one. And
Here's the
it was
bag.
it was very poetic, you know, because I was kind of like, cool, there's a couple things I need to finish here. And one of them was like finally cutting the app over to this rewrite that we did. And then I kind of left. So I did finish that project. But yeah, also very deeply focused just on that one product. I never really dove out of that member centric view
Mm.
while there. Um,
Yeah, I feel like we threw you a lot of problems at TiVo, and like you kind of just they're very like focused, and you just took them and ran with them really well.
mm-hmm.
Where like you know other developers, obviously the spectrum, other developers like would struggle with the you know narrow and deep kind of work that needed to be done. Like event matching, I think was one of the things that you like really worked well on.
That's what I was doing on right when I left. That's what I was working on. And I loved that problem. That was a good
That
one.
was a cool problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of the same for me now too. Yeah, I guess I do like to go narrow and deep. I won't talk about what I'm doing now because I don't know if I'm allowed or not. Like, I don't know how that stuff works, but yeah, I'm still doing that thing.
I'm curious. I'm curious about something you
ahead.
just said. The rewrite at WeWork from Angular to React. Like,
Yeah.
you said that took 4 years from beginning to end.
Oh yeah, it did.
Like what? I don't understand those justifications. Like, what triggered that? Like, why? Can you tell the story behind that? Because I'm really curious.
Oh yeah, sure. I love that story. So yeah, when I started, small team, it was called DMX, Digital Member Experience, and I was the only front end, as I mentioned. And then we added a few people that did front end after that. Adam, who was the first guest on this episode, he was one of them. He started maybe like a month after myself, and we rewrote conference rooms. That was kind of like our first job, to rewrite the front end for conference rooms. It was in this like old inside of Rails view app, and we migrated it over into the Angular app. But we did not want to write it in Angular because I'm really good at React. I didn't know Angular, and a lot of the new developers were junior and they also knew React. They didn't know Angular, and the rest of the organization used React. They had all switched over. So we used like this library that would allow you to render a React component from an Angular component. And we just kind of like cut it there and made like a whole new world. And we did this for conference rooms. And that was a whole effort of, a few months. And then we were supposed to like make like platformize some of those components and then slowly phase out each piece. That was the plan. But around then we were growing, and what happened was a few other teams started converting things to React, just like copying our code. And there was nothing platformized. It was just like a whole bunch of different new worlds being created within the app. And then while this was going on, I was kind of helping manage it, like talking with those teams. But then there was a reorg, and they moved Adam and myself to a new team that was with a startup that got acquired called Welkio, and they were like the guest iPad thing that you check in with.
Oh, yeah.
And it was called Space Jam. So we took the conference room app and the guest app from WeWork, and we merged into that team, and we changed focus. We were basically like deprecating the WeWork guest registration app and integrating with like our ID system with the Welkio ID system, just doing that kind of work. And then while that was happening, these other teams kept growing, and they were adding these React components, or they were still building in Angular. And that was, and then the Rooms backend app that we had inherited started having scaling issues. So we had to focus on that for like 6 months because there was no one in the org that really could help us. There were a few subject matter experts that had dealt with this at like Vimeo and stuff, but from Ticket Evolution, when you have these issues that are happening in production, it's sometimes hard to identify. It could take up a quarter of all the senior engineers, right? So that's what happened, and it was just Adam and I. So we had to this Welkio company was Laravel, by the way. They were all Laravel, all AWS. So our manager at the time was like, I can't help you at all. So it was just us two like owning this app. And then by the time we there were a couple more reorgs and such. And by the time we started getting tickets about how shitty the front end app was because no one was paying attention to it, it was like 2 years later, right? So like 2 years went by, and I think there was a whole year where there was like not even one commit on the front end app, not even one package update, nothing. And it wasn't good. It was in this weird state. So we made this task force where we took like a senior engineer from each product team, and we like we basically evaluated and said like, let's just start over. We have a new design anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that took about a year, and it would have been finished in a year, but then there was like a lot of things with WeWork politically with the IPO, and there were layoffs, and they basically laid off that whole team. And we went back to our product teams. They like canceled the project a little bit, decentralized it. There were just changes, and that was why. It wasn't really like coding that took 4 years. It was a whole odyssey of literally like the Odyssey, like I felt like I was going home and like killing all the suitors off before I could take my wife back,
Yeah, bureaucracy.
Yeah. That was why. So, but that was all a really good learning experience. I mean, I had 9 managers in 4 years at WeWork. It was a good,
Wow.
like I've met a lot of people,
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I'm always curious about like when those rewrite discussions happen. Like, I really don't think a rewrite makes sense in 95% of the cases.
Yeah. No, I
And
agree. I didn't agree with the rewrite, honestly. It wasn't me that made that decision. It kind of was like frustrating because I was working on the conference room backend stuff still. And these conversations happened, and they were like, we're going to make this task force, and we're going to rewrite. And I was like, what? And I guess I'll help. But yeah. I mean, my role in that rewrite was basically decommissioning everything over and like writing the piece that would let you, when you like load a URL, it would tell you like if you had like a certain cookie, we used a cookie to point to the 2 different backends because it was a slow rollout. So the first thing we upgraded was conference rooms, like the UI for that. We migrated it over, and it was a like slow, complicated thing. I personally, like I spent a year figuring out all the tech behind how we're going to switch over the app, where I could have been writing code. Like I could have just been converting things over. Totally agree. I think rewrites are, it's a good trade-off. I wouldn't say they're always not necessary. We did get it done. We rewrote the app. So it happened, but I don't know,
Yeah, it's hard to quantify the value of like, what did that give you? And then everything you lost is like a hard intangible.
Yeah. One thing this is changing topics a little bit, but one thing that you've always been seeming to do on your spare time that I wanted to ask you a little bit about was your side hustles, because to me, that's like, if I was going to, I should have said it in the intro, but I kind of like tapered off. But to me, you're like the side hustle guy. Like you are the master at, I feel like working at an agency is apropos for that reason, because you're good at starting up ideas and just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what happens with it.
Yeah, I think I have a problem personally. I just like I like creating stuff. I don't know, like the 0 to 1 step is just like intoxicating. Like it's fun. And I think like, that's why I learned to code in the first place. Like I wanted to build a business, and I realized that tech was a good way to do that, and learned to code to build, at the time, some pretty bad ideas. But I realized I could do it really quickly. And I mean, it just gets easier and easier. I mean, we can spin up ideas in honestly like a week, days. Like it's pretty crazy. I feel like, I hope my ideas are getting better, which you kind of, like you said, like you throw stuff against the wall and you see what sticks. The bottom line is like, they're really just a lot of fun to do. And I've been having this kind of, I think that the common argument against what I do is you are, breaking up your focus. You're can you actually succeed if you're doing so many things in parallel? And I hear this, like, I was literally just talking to someone on Twitter about it like yesterday, like, you know, the common, like, oh, a billionaire told me one tip, and the tip was that you need to focus. And I agree that focus definitely helps. My concern is, like, are you focusing on the right thing? And the opportunity cost of focusing on the wrong thing is pretty huge. And like this, like, I just don't like the dogmatic, like, blindless, I'm just going to focus on this for the sake of focusing on it. And so for me, like, the working on lots of different projects gives me the opportunity to kind of make small bets, test out things, see if they get any traction. The overhead, the cost of that is relatively low. And is there a chance that I don't give something the opportunity to succeed by focusing on something else? Maybe, and probably to an extent, but like, I think the upside of testing new ideas, making small bets, outweighs the cost of, you know, not letting something come to fruition. But yeah, it's fun, and I know I think about it a lot because there's a lot of things that I focus on, but like, it's a good time, and I'm enjoying doing it. But
yeah, and you know what, I don't know if I do think that I agree with the person on Twitter saying if you're trying to start a startup and throwing a lot of things at the wall, it might not happen. But you're not saying that. Like, I struggle with this as well. Like, I have the same problem, and I've, you know, channeled it in my own way. But like you tweeted a few days ago that you have, like, you know, or maybe you wrote it on your blog and I read it, that you have like a $250 Namecheap bill every year or something like that. I have the same problem. Like, I have like all these, you know, domains that I am like, I'm going to just build this thing, and why not?
Yeah.
But that's more, to me, you're a tinkerer, right? Like, you just like to tinker with it. And I don't know, even if one of them got big, if that would be, I feel like it'd be a little bit of an identity crisis for you, right? Because defining yourself by the one idea that you just threw at the wall could be hard, right? Like, I think more of you as tinkering with these ideas and seeing which ones work. If one took up all your time, you'd be itching to go back to the ideation of it.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see, because like this latest one, like, I really am gung ho on, and part of it too is like, it's the first developer tool that I've built, and so like, I really didn't understand what like founder market fit meant until this tool, because I've been building tools and like ideas, and you know, there were some that, like, in hindsight, like, were just obviously not a good fit for me and my personality. And in the early days, I feel like a founder fitting in with what they're building just kind of removes the hurdles that come with building a business. And so there's one that I'm thinking of exactly is like, it was so in Astoria, there's parking is a pain in the ass. And everyone has a car because everyone has a car. I don't know why, but they do. And there's all these like areas behind the way Astoria is built that there's these open parking lots behind all the buildings, and they're unused. And I was like, everyone's like fighting for parking on the street, but there's like a significant amount of area behind the buildings. And so I started this like basic parking spot, peer-to-peer parking spot application. And really the main way to get it going was just to like go door to door and ask people, like, do you want to list your parking spot and make some money on it? And it was just like painful for me. Like, I didn't have it in me to like go door to door on this idea. And I did it for a bit, but I was like, I just woke up one morning, I was like, I hate this. Like, why am I doing this? And it just wasn't a good, you know, fit for my personality, what I wanted to do. And so there was just too much of like a hurdle there, or resistance. With this new tool, HostedHooks, like, it's a problem that I've seen over and over. I'm like very, very optimistic about this like kind of low code movement that we're going in. And as someone who does build a lot of web apps, like, you know, they're becoming commoditized because of these little, you know, components and services that are being created. And that bit of it is really what I'm like excited about. And that's, I'm interested to see, because I think this has a lot of legs and is can be very helpful and can be a really strong business. I would be okay like just running with this one and sticking with it and literally dropping everything else I'm doing if it made sense that this was the opportunity to take. I think like I have to, my gut has got to tell me that this is the opportunity to pursue. And up until this point, the things that I've thrown at the wall really haven't stuck. And so I haven't stuck with them. And there's a lot of things that are passive. I think another distinction there too is not everything needs to be a home run. Like you can have singles. Like I've got Shopify apps that are generating, you know, 2K MRR every month. And like that is generating cash flow for these other businesses that I'm building. And, you know, you get enough of those and you might not need to do anything else. You just focus on, you know, the cash flowing businesses. But yeah, I always will be a tinkerer to a certain extent. I think there's a lot of things you can do, especially around how you build a business that customizes it to the way you want to run your business. So like, for example, I think there's a whole conversation going around, especially with the whole Basecamp thing that went down around like full-time employees versus part-time employees. And like, you know, if you don't want to be beholden to culture and a team and all these kind of things, maybe you hire part-time employees and that's all you focus on. And you can build a viable business doing that. And that would, you know, make me feel a little more comfortable not putting my entire focus on one business. Because once you have team members that are relying on it, putting in their full time on an idea, yeah, you've got to do the same with them, or else it's not going to really work that well. So I don't know, I'm excited about the different ways that you can customize businesses nowadays to fit the way that you want to grow them.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. It's I love the path that you took to kind of tamper your tinkerism with that. Like for me, I chose, like, instead of having all these small bets, I've been trying, like, the only way I justify stuff is I'm like, okay, like pretty much after we stopped talking, I was, you know, around then I was still having my own like app ideas and stuff. And I was like, I'm just going to invest in myself as a musician. Like that's going to be my startup. Cause like I can't get any traction on anything. And like, if I put my name on it, I'll just slowly chip away. But it's the same outcome, right? Like, cause I'm like, I recorded an album. It's just out there now, you know, like it's done. Now I can move on to the next thing. A song is very like finite and passive, right? Because you're like, I recorded it. Maybe it's shitty, maybe it's not, but I'm done. Like I released it, and now I'm done. And a performance is the same way. You can prepare for it. And this is sort of my next version of that. And I even in podcasts, I wanted to have so many different types of podcasts. I couldn't even get started. And I was like, I'm just going to start it with my own name, and I can throw paint at the wall. And as long as it's my own name, I'll be fine with it. But you're right. Like at what point, there's no parallel to the podcast, but I want to go back to like what you were saying about taking HostedHooks. And if it does become something that's worth focusing on, that maybe it is a good founder. What did you call that? I never heard that term before. Founder topic.
Founder market fit.
Founder market fit. Yeah. That is like, I never heard about that before, but totally. Yeah. It's a good, like, yeah, you have to have it. I don't know if you have to, but to be happy.
I don't think you have to. I think my personality does, just because I get distracted easily. I think your classic like MBA type that are just in business for business. Like, so I think another part too is another good way of explaining this is like taking companies through the stages. So like the 0 to 3 versus the 5 to 10 stage. Like I'm a 0 to 3 guy. I'm not going to ever want to be a 5 to 10 guy. Like it's just not me. And I understand that. And maybe it changes, but probably not. I mean, we'll see. But like the 0 to 3 is so exciting. It's so much fun. It's the creating part. It's like it has so many challenges, but it's like it's the fun part for me. Once you start getting into, and this is why I struggled a bit at TiVo towards the end, is they're trying to go from the 3 to the 5 stage. And the 5 just had so much like bullshit and bureaucracy and process and stuff that just like doesn't make any sense to me at the stage we're at. And I mean, I would argue we weren't ready for the 5 yet. We were still at the 3. But the ability to kind of just focus on the 0 to 3 for me, like I could be plenty successful in 0 to 3. Like I think you can sell. I mean, I don't think there's like revenue numbers necessarily tied to it, but like, you know, a 3 could easily be sold for millions of dollars, and let someone take it over to take it to the 5 stage, and that's a success in my mind. Maybe I just build stuff and I sell it, and then you know, move on to building something else and keep going. Like I don't see myself, like I said, like stop tinkering, and like it's just tinkering on the right thing.
Okay, so
yeah,
let me ask you. So this is really interesting to me. So let's focus on 0 to 3, right? Because I like 0 to 3 as well. I actually I agree with you. I don't know what these steps are. It's like estimating sprint points. You know, like they have no actual meaning. But yeah,
arbitrary.
Yeah, 0 to 3. Totally know what you mean, and I also know what you mean. I'm not a fan of the 4 or the 5. I do have to say I've been a big fan of 6 and 7, and I don't know if I'll like 8 or not. Like I feel like after that, but 6 and 7 to me seem like a step from, they're like a calling back to 0 to 3, because things went too crazy in 4 to 5. Things got too structured. So you do things like, why do we have stand up every day at 9 o'clock? Why wouldn't it be at 11:30 so that people can work whenever, like come in whenever they want? Like that kind of stuff I love, right? Because we worked at TiVo, right? Like we saw the 0 to, we were there at like 3, you know.
Yeah.
And it should have been 4 toward the end, but it was jumping to 5, like you're saying, after I was gone. Whatever with all that though, right? Like if you like 0 to 3, how do you, I think this would be interesting for people listening, even if they're not developers, right? But, and especially for me, I'm a big 0 guy, like 0, but I have a hard time getting to 1. What do you like about going from 0 to 1? And I don't know what 1 is, but you know, neither one, we both have our own idea of 1, right? But
Sure.
like, how do you take something from 0 to 1?
Yeah, I think 0 is like just the idea. 1 is like building it.
Yeah.
And I'd say some form of traction or interest, you could say, if it's not even like tech. Like it just has to have like, people got to be interested in what you're creating. The 0 to 1 part is just the making part of it, in my opinion. And I can only really speak about the tech side of it. Like I'm not musical. I can't create music. I can write, I guess. And so I guess that's creating. Content's a little different because I feel like in its like individual pieces, like you're completing it and then you're putting it out there and it's kind of done. Like it's nice. Like you're finished. You're not really iterating on top of it over and over, where with software or, you know, other stuff, you are iterating. Software is like, it's become extremely easy to create the 0 to 1. I think like the 1 to 2 is really the hard part, or where most of these ideas are dying. And they're like the product hunt ideas. Like there's so many on there, and they've created something, but it just like it can't get to that next step. And that to me is, I don't have an answer for it, obviously, but like that's kind of the challenge of it now is like the creating has become so easy. How do you get people to use it and like it and pay for it and start generating some revenue for it? And then from 2 to 3 in my eyes is like, how do you grow that revenue to something sustainable, maybe profitable? I don't know what those numbers would be, but it depends on the business. But yeah, the does it kind of answer, does
Oh
that
yeah,
line
yeah,
up with
yeah,
your 0 to 1?
yeah. It does, and I'd say like, what do you think three is? Three like full time? Like that at that point, it's a company. You know, it's like TiVo when we started. Maybe there's a few people working on it. Maybe.
Yeah, I haven't really standardized it across like all businesses, so it's kind of hard for me to say, but I would say, yeah, three is like a sustainable business that can, employ people. 2 is probably like,
What stage would you be looking for funding if you wanted it, or if you have to make that decision? Is it 2 or 3? You think?
I mean, I think you could do it at 1 right now in the way the market's going. Like, but if you wanted to grow, I'd say between like 2 and 3, probably. But you could do pre-product. I mean, people are raising money pre-product right now. Yeah.
Um, it's really interesting too, because when you were talking about that, I was only thinking in software when I asked you, honestly, but I started thinking about music as well, and well, any business, right? And but the music is really interesting because I feel like the numbers are so much different for music. Like maybe it's a different shape curve because you could write something and put it out and iterate on it, but you have to define what putting it out means. I guess it's the same as software. But like for me, like I'll write a song, and this is what I really liked about it, right? And a lot of musicians don't do this, but I'll write a song here alone, on my guitar, and the first thing I'll do is I'll go to an open mic night and I'll play it and I'll
Hmm.
see how it feels. And you have to, like, the only way you get good at it, no different than a comedian, but the way that I've gotten good at it is you kind of play a cover first. You usually play like 3 songs at an open mic night, right? So you kind of sandwich the new one in between like a cover and like something will feel good. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like stage 2 musician, right? Because you have to have the cover and the song that's good. But yeah, like
Sure.
you'll kind of pilot the song and throw it at the wall, and like sometimes they don't hit. And then you have a question to ask yourself, like, is this just not a good live performance song? Do I need to redo the way it's performed? Is it something that'll sound good on headphones and not live? Like, what's the
Sure.
problem here? And then it's interesting because for me, then I go back and iterate on it. And I don't know if everybody does that, right? And then you want to work it toward the end of that trifecta, right? Like then eventually that song becomes the third one and you have a new place in the beginning where you have a new cover and you try to like put them all together. But those stages are all like they're like a micro, like is like you start to pay attention to is Ian listening? Like I'm playing in a coffee shop. How many people are not listening right now? Because at first, I mean, it's hard. Like you don't want anyone to listen, like at all as a performer. But once you get like more comfortable with it, you're throwing a new song out there, and you're like, is anyone watching? Like, what do they look like? Do they like it or not? Like how are they reacting to this? And man, I miss that actually. I haven't done that for a couple of years because of COVID and the baby. But yeah, that's like why that's the 0 to 3 for a song for me. And then recording it is 4 or level 3, right? And then putting it out is 4, and seeing how people will listen to it is the rest.
Yeah, I didn't even like, I didn't even thought of that parallel. It's like, it's really interesting. And I bet I would guess you're probably more analytical than most because of the way your brain works, and your background. But, yeah, I like the analytical part of it and the iterations.
Well, and
Um,
comedians do that a lot. That's actually where I
yeah,
took it
I knew
from.
that.
You
Yeah.
know, like that concept I took from listening to so many of those comedian podcasts where they're like, I have to go, like Joey Diaz. You ever listen to him? He's like, I got to go to the
No.
open mic. He's like this guy from New Jersey, right? This Jersey, like old school. Um, he's Cuban, but he sounds like he's got like the Italian mafia accent. You know, he's like, I got to go to the open mic nights, dog. You know, I got to try out my new jokes and see if they stick or whatever. And like for comedians, they're lucky enough that they get like the laughter. You know, for
The feedback.
musicians,
Yeah.
you have to really you watch.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of musicians do not look at it that way. But yeah, I didn't pick that up even from it's agile though, right? Like it's an
It is.
agile way of doing it. But that's I took it from comedians. Um,
Makes sense. Something you said that was interesting is, like you get more comfortable releasing over time. Like I've gotten to this point now where I release products. Like I remember the beginning, like I was like terrified of like releasing like something out there, and like just going through it so many times, like it's like second nature now. I don't even like really like worry about it too much. It's just more about the timing and making sure I'm doing it right. I think too, like something that's really kind of blowing up now is this whole like audience building component of what you're creating. And it's so important to find, you can go out there and just get people to follow you, but getting the right people to follow you that are actually going to engage and give you feedback on what you're doing is so important. And I mean, it's like your like coffee shop analogy. Like, I mean, you could have a bunch of people in that coffee shop who don't even like the genre of music you're making, and like the song could be killer, but like if they don't like that type of music, I mean, you're not going to get any good feedback. And so your audience, like matters so much, like digitally and physically too.
yeah. Oh yeah, that's a great analogy. Because yeah, your music forms like my music formed around that because it's hard to get a gig. Right. So my gigs that I was searching for were on the criteria of I want to play as long as possible. So those were just open mic nights, right? So that's like throwing it out. But then when you're talking about like gigs too, because gigs are a 3 hour version of that. So my wife and my parents and the people that would come, like my friends would like think I'm crazy because like I wouldn't even take a break. Like I have like 80 songs and like I want to throw them all out there at this place on this day and see which ones stick, which ones work. That's the developer in me, right? Like I'm like, what ordering matters. But you're right. Like you start to notice things like I personally felt there were places I would go to the open mic night at that I couldn't gig at because I didn't have a band, right? Like a bar, right? Because I'm just an acoustic guitar. Like I'm like, I need to have an electric and a bass or drums and bass or something. It wouldn't work here for 3 hours. I know it, right? But like so that was a barrier that I had. But besides that, you're like, this song won't work at a coffee shop. Like I have to pull something else out of my pocket. Um, but it's catering to that audience. But you could also look at it the way you're saying, where like you could go somewhere where you think the audience will fit what you have. Um, but yeah, audience building is huge and it's really hard. I'm curious to hear how you've been solving for that problem yourself on your projects, because that's something I struggle with.
Yeah, I mean, so kind of like a little kind of history on like what I've been creating, I think will help kind of line that up. So, I mean, since like 2017, 16-ish, like I've been doing a lot of Shopify stuff, Shopify app development, all that kind of stuff. And I really didn't use Twitter prior to 2018, 19 maybe. Like I had an account and it just kind of sat there, and I didn't realize there was like it was so vibrant, especially in like the tech world. Um, and I think like in 2019-ish, like I started kind of going down this like Shopify path, like trying to build a following and then, following people and just like joining this ecosystem that was relevant to what I was working on. And it's there, like it's pretty, it's vibrant. It's like, there's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of cool people, and I've met a lot of cool people through it. Um, and, the, uh, the, so from that, like I've been trying to find the type of like audience that I want. And this is kind of another factor of like the developer side of it. Like I like talking about tech. I like talking about software development. I like talking about crypto. I like talking about like just kind of technical things in general. And so building a product that is for people like me just feels so natural. And it's kind of like, it feels like I found my people when I'm trying to like talk about dev tools and like APIs and like problems that I've had personally. So I think it's really important that you find something that you're interested in talking about, and that it has to be obviously something that other people are interested in talking about too. But that's kind of been it. It's the same idea. Like I've just been throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And, so far it's been pretty good. Obviously we'll continue and see how it goes, but same mindset as like just the tinkering. Like I'm just testing. I mean, I think that's what we're kind of getting at here is like we both are doing just a lot of like little experiments over and over and over, trying to see what works, and then pattern matching and like just continuing down the path of like success and iterating and seeing. And we have no idea until we do it, and then we see and we go from there.
Yeah. Oh, and that's a really good call out too, that last piece. Because with music, that's everything. When you're at that coffee shop, sometimes the song you don't even like is the one that resonates with that coffee shop that day. And for me personally, because I'm a tinkerer, right? Like I just go with it. Like I'm like, that's cool. Like this like sappy love song type thing I wrote. Like I'm not going to write another one of those just for the coffee shop people, most likely. I'm going to write what I'm going to write. But if I'm at the coffee shop, I'll play the sappy one, Like I'm not going to try to change what they like.
Give the people what they want.
To some extent. And it's interesting. And you're right. Like you do have to also kind of find the people that you have to find it, like the founder market fit or whatever you were saying. What is it? Founder product fit, founder market fit.
The product market fit is like the common one. Founder market fit. I don't know where I heard that or where.
I love it.
I didn't come up with it. It's
I know
out
you
there.
didn't. Yeah. Like I'm going to use this model in my head from now on, because there's a lot of similarities with music and even with this podcast, right? Like I'm not shying away. Like the last episode is very much catered toward music. Like we literally listened to music and talked about the music. Cool. But I'm planning on like just talking to people the way I talk to in my day to day, and that's software development too. So like that person that was on that podcast, my friend Adam, can totally listen to this one and get something out of it. Maybe one of like my music friends might not get anything out of this when we're talking about Rails or whatever, but they can skip it. It's like I have to find a following that's similar to me.
Yeah, I think this is another kind of interesting point. Is like I think people try too much to redefine like who they are, rather than just be authentic and just. I mean, it's just so much easier to not like go against the grain of your personality. And it's something that like I can't do personally. I personally can't do it. I wouldn't be able to be someone I'm not. And I think there's like obviously controls there that you can put in place. Like, there's a time and place to be, to like use, bad language or like, maybe be a little more radical than you should, or maybe more salty than you should. And there's, constraints there, but all in all, like you're generally the same person. I think at our ages too, like we're not going to change that much. And so you might as well embrace it and kind of go with the flow and then see where it takes you. There's going to be people who gravitate and like, your ideas resonate with that enough that you'll be able to build an audience. I see too many people online that are like, I need to be a more interesting person. And it's like, it's not like a switch you can just flip. Like, just be yourself and just be open.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting, right? And that's part of the reason that I'm not focusing too much on anything on this podcast in particular, because I don't find that interesting. I wouldn't want to listen to a podcast where like it's narrowed in on one thing. Like I want to hear, but that's also the tinkerer type element that we share, right? Like I'm interested in a lot of things. So if I had a software development podcast or even a software development and music podcast, like when am I going to talk about kombucha making or like whatever else there is? Like I want to explore it all. And that's what
Yeah.
makes it interesting, right? Like you're showing someone yourself. It makes it more authentic. So that's a good point. And you also touched, we have to like wrap up soon. But you touched on something really awesome in there too that I want to comment on, which is um with our age, right? And I also feel like we share this, right? But like being a parent, you go through this identity crisis with certain things because you do have to censor yourself from a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. Like even just like being scary sometimes or like do like talking loud, not even just cursing.
Yeah.
But your kid still knows who you are. It's not like they're like don't know you. They just you're refraining from doing something. So you're right. There is a time and a place. It's not like you can just go out and be. My dad said this to me once because I like lost my temper, right? He's like, you can't just go out and be Donald Trump all the time. Like exactly. Like there's a time and a place to like go. I prefer to call it going hip hop on someone, like it's like even with music, you're not going to listen to hip hop with a baby in the car, but it doesn't mean your. Can't know that you like hip hop.
Yeah, me can't
Um,
like hip hop. Yeah, totally.
um, yeah. So that was a really good point. And online is no different. You have to kind of understand your audience and understand you have to be respectful of it. That's really what it is. Um, cool. So yeah, I have to run. Usually I am the one that doesn't have to run, but today I do. So
Okay.
thanks for coming on here. Of course, like this was a great chat. I'm down to do it anytime.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you inviting me. This is fun. And we haven't talked in a while, so it's good to catch
yeah,
up.
yeah, exactly. And before we go, why don't you give a little plug for yourself on, of course, you just launched Hosted Hooks and people heard a little bit about that on here. Um, they could check that out and tell them where they can find you, etc.
Yeah, yeah. So this is probably mostly for developers, but the issue of building a scalable and reliable webhook sending solution. So like Stripe webhooks, if you've ever integrated with them, like it's a wonderful experience. That experience should be in your app if you need webhooks as well. So we've built a platform. It's a webhooks as a service platform that allows devs to add that functionality to their apps. You can check it out at hostedhooks.com. Same handle on Twitter. And yeah, no, I appreciate this, Rich. This was fun.
Sure. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm
Anytime.
down at any time.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll definitely have you back on soon, sooner rather than later, hopefully.
Cool. Sounds good.